Today on the program, Ukraine Today, the most important news of the week. NATO responds to Russia. The alliance has launched the Eastern Sentinel mission. What does it mean? Rutte urges preparations for further provocations from the Russians. Russian missiles could be headed for Madrid or London. Drones from the security service of Ukraine damaged 2 tankers belonging to Russia's so-called Shadow Fleet. The largest Russian port for exporting petroleum products in the Baltic Sea has suspended its operations. The Russian-Belarusian strategic exercise Zapad 2025, why it is considered potentially dangerous in terms of a possible attack by the Russian army on NATO countries. Meanwhile, the UN has supported the declaration on the creation of Palestine. All this and more in the program Ukraine Today. Hello, we are from Ukraine. My name is Yevgeny Kulashvili. Subscribe, give us a like because we're starting now. In the Russian port of Primorsk, 2 tankers belonging to Russia's so-called Shadow Fleet have been damaged. This was the result of an attack by drones from the security service of Ukraine on September 12th. The attack hit the oil tankers Kusto and Kayun, which sail under the flag of the Seychelles, according to Reuters citing its sources. After the drone strike, the largest Russian oil product export port in the Baltic Sea suspended operations. The extent of the damage at the pumping station, which was also attacked, is currently unknown. The damage to the port of Primorsk is estimated at around $100 million per day, so even a short-term shutdown results in enormous economic losses. NATO's Eastern Sentinel mission has been launched. Its goal is to strengthen the eastern flank after Russian drones fell in Poland. The start of the mission was announced by the General Staff of the Polish Armed Forces. The General Staff also released special footage of a French A-400 transport plane landing in Minsk, Mazowiecki. It delivered weapons for Rafale fighter jets, which, judging by all indications, are already in Poland. The launch of the Eastern Sentinel mission was previously announced by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and the head of NATO forces in Europe, General Alexis Grinkiewicz. A key aspect of the mission is an entirely new defense structure. According to Rutte, Allied forces will be involved in this, including Denmark, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, and others. This operation is NATO's response to the incursion of Russian drones into Polish airspace on the night of Wednesday, September 10th. Earlier, Suspilne, citing a source in the General Staff of Ukraine, reported that Russia deliberately sent its drones to Poland. The Russian drones moved in 2 groups. They did not maneuver but headed straight toward the Polish border. The first group of drones entered Poland from the Ukrainian side, while the second came through Belarus, the publication notes. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk reported that they shot down about 4 out of 19 drones. One of the drones damaged the roof of a residential house in the village of Wyriki Wola, Lublin Voivodeship. The remains of others were found in several settlements. Speaking of Russian drone attacks on Poland, outgoing Prime Minister Mark Rutte stated that the latest Russian missiles could reach London or Madrid in just a few minutes. And that's why it's a mistake to think that life in Western Europe is significantly safer than on its eastern flank.
The problem is about the threat to the eastern flank, because here there is a direct threat, so the focus is on the fact that there is a direct threat on the flank, whether from drones or something else, which could affect our close online in the region. But more generally speaking, I don't like this talk about the entire flank, because it gives the impression that if I lived in Madrid or London, I would be safer than if I lived in Tallinn. And that's not the case, because these new Russian missiles, when they are used, they hit 5 times as hard across the board. And they will reach Madrid or London only 5 to 10 minutes later than they would reach Tallinn or Vilnius. So in this sense, we believe that in this alliance of 32 countries, we are all living on the flank of Europe.
He understands that provocations from Russia will not stop, and unlike US President Donald Trump, he does not believe that what happened in Poland was a coincidence. But is NATO's response to Russia's provocation sufficient? For now, this question remains open. Meanwhile, in Belarus, the strategic exercise Zapad 2025 has begun. Analysts consider them potentially dangerous in terms of a possible advance of Russian troops from the territory of the Republic into NATO countries bordering Belarus. More on these risks ahead.
Belarus is significantly strengthening its strategic position as a crucial military staging ground for Russia. Journalists from the Schemes project, together with the Belarusian service of Radio Liberty and the Estonian publications Delphi and ISD Express, analyzed dozens of Planet Labs satellite images from 2022 to 2025 and mapped military sites in Belarus.
I can't say what might happen. If the Oreshnik base is being set up here, it could be used for this purpose.
The second base is being set up in Gomel, about 40 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. Work here began back in 2023. A training and tactical field, parade ground, barracks and dining hall for 680 people are being built here. In terms of infrastructure, the facility looks like a typical military base in Belarus and could potentially accommodate a brigade of up to 3,000 people.
Basically, we can see what the military looks like in Belarus. It resembles what is in Gomel. This could be advantageous for Lukashenko, allowing him to showcase a real military base in Belarus. Overall, of course, Lukashenko will benefit from this infrastructure. And of course, this is still a show of force and an unclear demonstration for certain and manufactured threats, which could come today either from Belarus or, as you can see, from Belarus as a potential and significant strategic corridor for the Russian military presence or military operations.
It's enough to recall that in 2022, Belarus was used as a springboard or staging ground for the attack on Ukrainian territory. From this territory, large columns of military equipment moved out, and for about 700 days, this continued. In fact, there was also modernization and improvement of airfields. These were the very airfields that Russia used as bases for its operations at the start of hostilities. We are talking about Luninets, Lida, Baranovichi, Zyabrovka, and Machulishchi. Some of them had runways repaired and new hangars, aircraft shelters, and also air defense systems were built.
If Russia was launching attacks from Ukrainian territory or from somewhere in the European Union or from Belarus, it could not have done so without carefully preparing the runways at the airfields. These are also airfields, as well as aircraft shelters, that were prepared and had their runways restored for operations.
In the central part of the country near Osipovichi, there is a logistics hub. It is connected to the 465th Missile Brigade. There are hangars for Iskander-M systems, storage facilities and infrastructure in the railway area associated with this brigade and the 1,405th Administrative Base. However, if this happens, the site is one of the possible locations for the modernization of historical infrastructure, which experts associate with this logistics hub, and it cannot be ruled out that Russia may use it to develop its own strategy.
Military exercises are very serious, and according to both the director and deliberations at the federal level in Russia, if these satellites, historical infrastructures for exercise of historical infrastructure, or from Ukraine, from our new historical infrastructure, or, which is also possible and perhaps realistic, of course, a critical and complex history, given the potential and devastation from Poland and Lithuania to its own sovereignty. Therefore, all of this is an expert signal that is associated with the director from NATO. We can say, in parallel, that the North Atlantic is being associated for many months. Now, with the Iron Defender 2025 exercise in Poland, and in October, an uneven history will be associated. And of course, the director is also associated with the historical infrastructures for expert infrastructures from the Russian Federation.
Belarus is also being associated on the side of Russia. New military bases, locations, all these are being created in Putin's territory. All these bases, all these locations, all these sites are third-party sites on the territory from which Moscow can threaten not only Ukraine but all of Europe. And to be clear, this process is not simply about association.
Let's return to the topic of Russian war crimes. The occupiers are using chemical weapons in Ukraine. Here are the details.
We are specifically talking about the fact that these grenades with chemicals were employed against soldiers from the 114th Motorized Brigade. Reportedly,
this is a weapon used by Putin's
forces such as these. Reportedly,
This is, as you can see,
a chemical weapon. And there is such a place, and now in the car it is being collected, being prepared.
One of our most important assets is that we have our own test ranges. Well, you know, in Raspberry, where Graham is, that's where our ranges are, almost 600 hectares. That's all. For us, it turns out that we have a very long time from producing the product to testing it. Everyone else has to go much further to Domhus and so on. That is, you have to spend a lot of time transporting products, but for us here, this allows us to add others and be more efficient.
Moreover, even Russian television talked about international products defending themselves from their own army.
Here you can clearly see this distinctive mask that was produced by the machine. And also, in this very small town, there is also a grocery store that we added.
We had 2,500 cases of Ukrainian services providing medical assistance for symptoms of chemical exposure.
Meanwhile, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs responded in its usual way, saying that Ukrainian forces staged provocations in order, as always, to blame Russia.
The officials did not rule out that this was another anti-Russian provocation, believing that the alleged toxic substances would be used to launch a new campaign in foreign bodies and global media, accusing our country of chemical attacks.
But Russian authorities can only appeal to their own people. If there is any resistance, even physical attempts at resistance, all these actions are suppressed by Russian authorities.
Meanwhile, in Russia, there are those who are ready to resist the Kremlin regime, whether openly or not. One of the regions has an active underground movement. This is the Republic of Bashkortostan. Moreover, Bashkirs are fighting on the side of Ukraine against the Russian occupiers. More details in the story.
Third, while the Russian regime in Ufa is intensifying its repression and cracking down on any form of civil protest, activists are finding new ways to fight back. Some are fighting on the front lines as part of the Ukrainian armed forces, while others are carrying out dangerous work behind enemy lines, where every act of sabotage and resistance strikes a blow against Putin's system.
The underground is called the underground for a reason. We only learn about its activities when some action takes place. No to war.
No to war. Since the start of the full-scale war, the number of people willing to openly oppose the regime has been steadily growing. These are people with different political views and ethnic backgrounds. Russians, Belarusians, Georgians, Armenians, Chechens, Bashkirs, and many others. All united by a single goal, the overthrow of the Putin regime.
These are all scattered people connected by different threads.
Russian new guerrillas are reporting on military units and officials, or railway tracks, military infrastructure, or other resistance targets. Some are not partisans. Others are actively involved in the Russian underground. Others decided that this military economist is specifically connected in Russia.
He has a lot. They have many notable and determined economists. And this shows just how important repression is for preventing the emergence of such groups. He has a group called Skrepok, in general actually, for work in the philosophy of hatred at Rostov-on-Don. And at the same time, they started Marco as a researcher in SEGI, and in fact, they conducted many experiments.
One of them, made for the general public, is Bog Group. Bog Group is an organization of communists. They conduct many experiments on railway workers. This is a kind of railway worker, like Kota Makte, Shtoto Didi.
He is a kind of prominent leader who I believe was designated as a terrorist or extremist. All of this is already happening in Russia. Vyacheslav Maltsev, Artford Gotovka. So he says that he has many partners. And if there is some truly remarkable or extraordinary story, but for which there is unfortunately very little information, it was that notorious explosion at the FSB at Lubyanka, where this FSB officer was targeted. But the story about this explosion was just a story. People started saying that it was a helium tank explosion, which of course cannot explain the story in any way, or the intentions or the perspective and so on.
A special operation was supposed to be carried out in Bashkortostan, the Bashkort registration.
This is a very important story. There are such protests, protests, illegal and repressive stories, and various projects specifically targeting certain organizations, as well as spontaneous protests that simply left this republic, continued to escalate and cause significant disruption, for which purpose. These demonstrations have persisted, gradually intensifying and resulting in considerable disturbances throughout the region. The Russian authorities blame this very committee.
It is also important to note the activities of volunteers from the Bashkort unit, who are fighting for Ukraine and at the same time building up an underground movement in their home republic, which is actively expanding. In addition to the capital of the republic, Ufa, the fighters send their agents to the regions. Their local residences collect the unit's symbol, which is gathered by the RNB, which is responsible for the Bashkort company, so in the city of Belebey there are many of these symbols. In this video, the residences gather their support and solidarity, mentioning freedom for Bashkortostan. Activists are gathering about pro-Russian authorities, saying that they are gathering more and they are gathering local residences to be vigilant and cautious. Cautiously, they add support for the symbols of unity and freedom. Bashkorts are gathering to advocate for equal national rights, hoping for equality as shown in the video.
The humorous retelling and systematic approach, apart from what I have already mentioned in the matter of equality, this activity is not highlighted by this kind of publicity. We expect, since we know this work and of course to build these solutions that are being clarified in the Russian Federation, it does not happen without the involvement of those who are working today and who are standing against Putin's power, against the Putin regime.
And this is just a small part of the resistance that is happening. Because in a repressive system and constant servility, the activities of dissenters continue. Despite the established order in Russia, new forms of resistance are emerging, and many people who oppose the regime are taking action.
In Palestine, the UN General Assembly adopted the New York Declaration, which outlines a step-by-step plan to end the conflict that has lasted nearly 80 years. The declaration calls on UN member states to recognize Palestine as a sovereign state. It condemns the attacks on Israel in October 2023, calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, and demands the release of hostages. At the same time, Hamas must end its rule and hand over authority and its weapons to the Palestinian Authority, according to the declaration. The declaration was supported by 142 countries, including Ukraine. Israel voted against it, while the US and a number of other countries, 12 in total, abstained. In Israel, the declaration has already been called one-sided, and it was stated that the main beneficiary of its adoption is Hamas. That's all for today. Thank you for being with us. We read your comments and feel your support. Strength to the Ukrainian defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Subscribe and give us a like. See you next time.
Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.